What is up? What is up, YouTube? Case. Private property case. The most disturbing video I've ever filmed. That's the name of this thing, man. This is the so it's been brought to my attention, the #1 place in the whole world, the #1 building that has, oh my God, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Let's check this out. We are trying to get as much clues as we can. There's going to be a lot of disturbing things that we're talking about. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Let's check this bad boy.
They were hearing the girls scream, acting on a tip about Marc Dutroux abducting and hostage. They were hearing the girls scream.
Now, I hit refresh twice and this thing started way over here.
Right now, we are driving to the Chateau 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗞𝗦. We just crossed over into Belgium, so we're out in the middle of nowhere in the Belgian countryside. This place is absolutely as notorious as they come. Definitely some anxiety in the air as we try to expose these creeps. This is a place a lot of people, I can guarantee, haven't heard of, but I want to raise awareness so that people do know what it is and they understand the very dark possibilities of what may be happening inside its walls. Yeah, we're 3 minutes away.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, looks like they got this place under fucking lock and key now. So we're right here. The chateau is right over here in this area.
Hey guys, Uncle Mike here with big news. YouTube has changed my life and now it's your turn. See, Uncle Mike was tired of being broke after every payday. So I decided to do something about it. So I invested over about $9,000 in YouTube courses and online coaching. Man, I was determined to change. But guess what? None of these systems gave me the one-on-one coaching that I needed. So I created my own YouTube course with the help that you need to make sure that you succeed. If you're ready to learn and you're not afraid to put in the work, you too can make a real change. Sign up now and Uncle Mike will send you the 4 videos that got me started. 100% free. Click the word more below and look for our YouTube growth system. That's our course. Now, let's get back to this video.
Area to our left. The security here is fucking bananas. I mean, dude, this is actually crazy. Look at how thick this forest is here. You cannot see through. So like, whatever the fuck is even behind this, I don't even know. If the allegations of human hunting parties that happen here are true, that would mean that it would be most likely in this forest area where those kids are being hunted and murdered.
For decades, rumors have swirled around a castle in Belgium. A castle supposedly inhabited by the darkest forces known to man. Forces that could possibly be from beyond our world or our realm of comprehension. Inside of these castle walls, trafficking, parties, murders, games where children are released into the woods and then hunted by adults to be killed, meetings of the Illuminati, dark black magic rituals. All these things are said to happen within the halls of the cursed Chateau 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗞𝗦. In today's episode of the Paranormal Files, we traveled to Belgium to visit the chateau in person, and we investigated. Oh my God, I get chills thinking about it right now because this one is so fucking dark. Now, from my perspective, and for you guys watching online, when you hear something like this, oh yeah, a conspiracy castle where there's parties and with masks and, you know, child hunting games and murders and Illuminati, it sounds almost impossible. Like there's no way that that could be true, that there could be validity in any of those statements. But we're going to review some documents today that were released in the wake of an infamous murderer's trial in Belgium. I've covered him already, and we're covering him in an upcoming episode of the Paranormal Files. The man's name was Marc Dutroux, and inside of these sealed documents that were leaked by Wikileaks is some pretty damning information about the Chateau 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗞𝗦. Information that really blew the lid off of this story. Now, we're going to cover some really dark and heavy topics today. I just want to state outright here, I do these episodes because I care about our world, because I hate corruption, I hate government corruption, I've had experiences with it in the past myself, and I just don't think we should allow as a society these sick to keep getting away with this type of shit. That should never be a possibility, but it keeps happening time and time again. And so raising awareness and educating people is my mission that, either I've given myself or been given by a higher power. I don't know why I'm drawn to cover these stories, but in the last couple of weeks, I've seen comments from people saying that I must be a myself covering my tracks by doing these stories, which makes no sense. People calling me crazy, saying I'm affiliated with political movements, which I'm not, and I've actually stated in my videos that I am definitely not involved with. So yeah, I don't understand the whole defending thing. It's a very weird thing to do. So if you're those people that are commenting those things and thinking those thoughts, I would step back for a second and think about, who am I sticking up for in this situation? Am I sticking up for Colin, the guy who's exposing sex trafficking and working with victims and advocates and investigative reporters? Or am I sticking up for the that have routinely raped and murdered children for decades that were never caught? I'll let you think on that one. Anyways, this one has some really, really crazy long history, and before we visit the castle in Belgium,
Here we go.
We need to do a deep dive. So let's just get started. Today's script and research was brought to you by Sabrin Chandler Lewis. Sabrin is a great friend of the channel, a close friend of ours, Courtney and I's, and yeah, she's incredible. So show her some love in the chat and the comments, please. Hey everybody, before we hop into this episode, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, Pi. Now, if you're a regular viewer of the Paranormal Files, you know that we produce very long episodes that are filled to the brim with ads. It's what helps keep this show alive. But if you get frustrated with them, you will receive reward extension for every video I could find about this. Actually on vacation, incredibly dark episode. So I initially came across this story. Someone tagged me in this, and I watched a YouTube video about it when I was actually on vacation, and immediately when I started learning about this place, I couldn't stop researching. So I ended up going through books. I watched every video I could find about this place. I did independent research, looked through documents, and tried to find as much information as I could about the chateau. But it's very weird because there really isn't much information about this place. Now, with chateaus or castles in Europe, usually when you Google them and you try to find their history, you will immediately discover, who's lived there, the things that happened there, the dukes and duchesses that called these places home. But when it comes to the Chateau d'Amerois, it seems that the history online has been heavily censored. In my opinion, that's for a reason. But it is very mysterious. With a place that's so huge and so historic, and it's an old building, usually you're going to find information about it online. But in my opinion, the history and information about the chateau has been purposefully obscured and hidden. And through this episode, you are going to understand why I think that. The Ardennes Forest, a beautiful expanse of rolling hills, towering trees, and rushing rivers. A lush, sprawling region. The dense woodlands and deep valleys cover thousands of square miles, reaching through Luxembourg, France, Belgium, and Germany. The thick foliage evokes a feeling of enchantment, while the rivers and streams bring serenity to the soul. It's the mystical beauty of the place that has drawn lovers of nature for many hundreds of years, but history buffs have their fair share of attraction as well. The history of the forest has been recorded since the Roman times, and the area is littered with historic ancient villages. The Ardennes is even mentioned in a 12th century song about Charlemagne, and the rock Bayard, which resides in the forest, is said to be the very site where the legend of Bayard took place. But the enchanted forest has its fair share of darkness, and contains legends much more sinister than those of the horse that jumped over the river Meuse with one powerful kick. Blood has soaked the grounds of the Ardennes, as it was the setting for the Battle of France, the Battle of the Ardennes, and the horrific Battle of the Bulge. Knowing this already gives the mystique of the forest an eerie light, but there could be something lurking in the trees that carries an even darker lore. In the gloom of the enchanting forest, a massive Gothic structure looms, its spires reaching to the
dude. It's like every haunted house and every crazy house is like, basically, it's time to do our live, man. The houses and everything, they all look like, maybe it's the drawing. They just look dark and look like trouble was there. If I saw that through the woods, Oh man, I'm turning back around right then and there. Look at this. Look at this.
As it was the setting for the Battle of France, the Battle of the Ardennes, and the
Spooky.
horrific Battle of the Bulge. Knowing this already gives the mystique of the forest an eerie light. But there could be something lurking in the trees that carries an even darker lore. In the gloom of the enchanting forest, a massive Gothic structure looms, its spires reaching to the sky with the spindly fingers of skeletons. The castle in question has 365 windows, numerous as the days of the year, and those windows peer out into the forest, watchful and omnipotent. The castle's powerful exterior may lend an air of beauty to the building, yet within, demons dance to the tune of satanic ritual chants. This place in question is the Chateau d'Amerois, the Castle of Kings, or as it's colloquially known, the Mothers of Darkness Castle, a structure so foreboding that locals in the nearby town refuse to speak its name. Rumors for years have covered the castle, numerous as the stones that built it, and whispers wind their way through the grounds of her guardianship like the wind. These whispers speak of witches, rituals of children, and a global cabal of the elite that secretly runs our world. The rumors speak of the fabled Illuminati and their dark designs that pull the strings of our governments and media like puppets on a stage. They speak of a man who stole children from their families and even ended their lives to supply the witches with fodder for their dark machinations. These rumors speak of fire, death, and destruction, creating the lifeblood of one of the darkest conspiracies in our world, one that could shatter the peace we so carefully construct for ourselves. Secrets that would plunge us into a worldwide society of chaos. Built originally in 1849 by the Count of Mesnil, Chateau d'Amerois resides deep in the countryside of Belgium, only a 12-minute drive south of the town of 𝗗𝗢𝗡𝗞𝗦, requiring passage through restricted roadways. The property was sold to Theodore van der Noot, the 8th Marquess of Asch, in 1859, then sold again 10 years later to Prince Philippe, Count of Flanders, brother of King Leopold II. These new owners were descended from the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha bloodline, the same bloodline as the current British royal family, and the same bloodline as the infamous Vlad the Impaler. Fire destroyed the original chateau structure in 1873, but Prince Philippe commissioned a replacement from architect Gustave Saint-Honoré, and his work, a massive neo-Gothic structure, still stands today. After the prince died in 1905, his 3 kids inherited the castle, after which they sold it to the liege wood merchant Robert Colette for 7 million Belgian francs. The exact date of the purchase is unknown, but Colette later sold the property once again. Alice Solvay, the niece of Belgian chemist and industrialist Ernest Solvay, purchased the castle, and her family continued its guardianship over 100 years later. The Solvays themselves are an elite family in Belgium, as Ernest and his brother Alfred created a chemical company in 1863, which they named after their family. This company, created to produce sodium carbonate, still operates to this day, and earned $12.4 billion in revenue in 2015, and employs over 30,000 people in 53 countries. Solvay is still in active production today, working on different types of sustainable fuel cells, as well as manufacturing fluorine or fluoride products, such as sodium fluoride, commonly used in drinking water. Now that's a whole conspiracy you can go down, calcifying the pineal gland, fluoride in our drinking water, and the government's real goals behind that. But we're going to leave that to another day. It is interesting, though, that this family that owns Chateau d'Amerois is in the fluoride business, which is kind of weird. The Solvays also maintained a pharmaceutical branch that developed and sold the SSRI Luvox for the treatment of obsessive compulsive disorder. However, this branch was sold to Abbott Labs in 2009. As some of the pioneers of Belgium's industrial prosperity, the Solvays were certainly wealthy enough and of enough status to own a chateau of such marvelous construction and history as the Chateau d'Amerois. But it seems that the Solvays were a private group, as very few photos of the outside of the castle are available or even exist, and pictures of the inside are nearly non-existent. There is no video tour. There are no photos of this place. Quite bizarre. Even in Ernest Solvay's time, he was regarded with rumor, as he and his family led very secretive lives. These early rumors of a secretive family living behind stone walls may have spun the locals into telling even darker tales as time has gone on. Or perhaps there is something more that made them wary of the property. When it comes to the Chateau d'Amerois, locals are frightened to speak of the place. If coaxed into telling their stories, they'll tell you tales of darkness, of things far more sinister than a family who likes to keep to themselves. Locals talk about tunnels beneath the building, secret chambers hidden within the castle, a room with 1,000 points of light in the ceiling, and a low melody that echoes through the woods on Belgium's darkest nights. Some even mention Egyptian symbols representing the sun on the building, pointing to dark occult worship. But beyond this mystery, haunting tales are shared between locals, tales of witches and satanic worship, and a cabal of the elite that joins with the witches in sacrificial blood magic. But is there any truth to these rumors? And moreover, how could any of this have been revealed, and why wouldn't somebody just go in and put a stop to it? Well, the Chateau d'Amerois was a fixture in Belgium for a very long time, but didn't gain its claim to a disturbing sort of fame until many years after it was built. Some argue that the Solveys, that family, were active in secret societies, with tales of extravagant parties that hosted many influential figures. The rumors of the Solvay family were definitely gossip-worthy, certainly, but they weren't enough to warrant such an insidious reputation. People who approach the Chateau d'Amerois today have noticed a number of extremely bizarre things. The castle is surrounded by tripwires, barbed wire, and a state-of-the-art security system. They have guards that are patrolling the grounds at all times, secret cameras hidden in the trees, tripwires, motion detectors. There's video and photo proof of these things.
Now here it is. It's raining like hell. This is the Mother of Darkness castle. I can't get any further. It's very dangerous here. You see the tripwires here? Look here. You got tripwire. Well, my lens is like condensing. I'm really sorry, but I don't feel like getting any further. You know, they'll only take my camera away and the footage. This is the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. Yeah. I mean, I'm all wet, and I hope nobody's sneaking up to me because it's got this thing here. You know. So it's the Mother of Darkness castle. Evil, pure evil. I can feel it. You see, there's the evil castle, and there's a sort of a monastery. This is weird, man. It looks like the door of some armored vehicle. It's really heavy. Yeah. Very heavy. Yeah. Thick glass, no, it's like... Look, I'm at the wrong side of the fence now. The castle is there. Never mind. Let's have a look there. Okay, here's the chapel or whatever it is. This place is so airy. It's really dodgy here. Okay, I'm inside. This is the best shot I can get at, you know.
What the hell are they hiding? We ourselves saw that stuff when we visited the chateau, and it's really, really crazy. I've been to 1,000 abandoned buildings. I've been to government buildings. I've broken into buildings that were protected. You know, I snuck onto a Royal Air Force compound in 2019 that was half abandoned. Snuck right by military police. They couldn't give less of a shit. This was in England. But the chateau is like the most secure place ever built. It definitely has a very, very eerie, odd vibe when you're out there. You know you're being watched. It's like Bohemian Grove. And you just know that something isn't right. It feels fucking terrible out there. And it's interesting because though the chateau is a historic building, once owned by a Prince of Belgium, both the National Geographic and the BBC have been denied access to the building by its owners. Yes, National Geographic and the BBC both independently reached out to the owners of the Chateau d'Amerois, wanting to talk about the history and wanting to visit the building and show what it looks like inside, but they were shot down. It's so strange. And the Chateau d'Amerois, also called the Castle of Kings, through all of this conspiracy, has now gained the notorious nickname, the Mothers of Darkness Castle.
The Amerois Castle was before the property of the crown in Belgium of Leopold. The family Solvay had a castle. I called Thérèse Solvay, I called my auntie, but I was a nephew, and we used to go very often during holidays or weekends in the castle. We used to sleep in beds with big baldachin.
Like a roof over the bed. Like the middle age, like a tent.
Middle age, yes, just like a tent. Once we had the opportunity, my brother and I, to see King Baudouin of Belgium, who was in visit there.
So in the castle you found some secret passages.
Yes, yes, but not very secret. We like to go by those passages and stairs.
And how old were you?
I was young, between 10 and 20 years, I think, yes.
Yeah.
And also, I
Man,
remember that
that's a big gap.
At Christmas time, Aunt Therese invited one of two children from England, as she was Anglican of religion. She invited poor young children to have a marvelous Christmas time and spend 15 days for Christmas and New Year. And I remember once there was a very little one who was a sort of Cockney, and he spoke very bad English from the streets of London. And another was at the same time, he was Scottish, a little older, 12 maybe, and he was very well
Educated.
And he was sorry because of the little one, and he said always, shut up, shut up, shut up. And the Scottish had make a pari. He had said, I
A
will...
bet. A bet.
A bet. He said, at midnight, Christmas time, I will spring and
Jump.
and
Swim.
swim in the basin.
Oh.
Un grand bassin avec jet d'eau.
Oh yeah.
And he made it.
So this book here,
Wow,
you got
he made it.
Who gave this to you?
Ma tante Thérèse. My aunt Thérèse.
Solveig.
Thérèse Solveig,
Okay.
Tournai Solveig,
Yeah.
gave it to me.
And the lady's name is Mason Dani.
Oui, ça c'est mon nom, hein?
Yeah.
It's my name.
Yeah.
She said the little boy jumped and swimmed. I guess swam to safety, but he made it. She said he made it. That's what I heard. So that's interesting.
It's about the King Albert.
It was the young time of King Albert, and there is a photo of a picture of Chateau des Amerois,
Yeah.
where young prince spent some time. Albert first of Belgium.
When was he the king, Albert?
He was king during the
My lad's getting cold.
14-18 war, and he was called le Chevalier.
So here's the castle.
Very popular. The most popular king of Belgium was Albert Ier.
The Mother of
And
Darkness castle.
He died in an accident in the mountain, à Marche les Dames.
Ah, in Belgium.
Yes.
So from your mother's side, you're from the family of Solveig?
My
the father's.
father's
Yes,
side,
I'm
yes.
sorry. Yes, of
My
course.
father's
And
side.
from your mother's side, you're from French aristocracy.
The mother of my mother was of French aristocracy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So we are here very near to the Chateau des Amerois, and quite amazing, meeting someone who actually slept there. So I thank you very much.
Wow.
Okay, thank you very much, Danielle.
But before we get into all of this, we need to find some evidence. And
Here we go.
need to talk about the Marc Dutroux scandal. Because
Here
these
we
dark
go.
tales wouldn't find their roots until the turn of the 21st century, but they couldn't have found more putrid soil to sprout from. Indeed, the stories of the castle truly took a turn for the unspeakable, once a man named Marc Dutroux entered the public eye in the worst way imaginable. Marc Dutroux, born November 16, 1956, was a career criminal who found his operating grounds on the streets of Belgium. We already did an episode about Marc Dutroux. If you want to do a deep dive into his case, it's already on the Conspiracy Files, and we did a documentary that's coming on my main channel in the next few weeks where we went to every single Marc Dutroux location, including the site of his house. We had people confront us. It's fucking crazy. Marc Dutroux was a scrap dealer and an unemployed electrician who supplemented his income with thievery, stolen car trading, and drug dealing. Some people believe that Dutroux was also involved in adult prostitution, but these crimes weren't enough for Dutroux as he grew older. You see, Dutroux had a record for being a pervert when it came to women. He would regularly and purposefully bump into women at local ice rinks as an excuse to touch them. This was already creepy enough, but Dutroux also had a wife and children at home. His first wife had divorced him over allegations of in 1983, and he later remarried. But Dutroux simply wasn't satisfied with one woman. According to his second wife, Dutroux would regularly go out and attempt to cheat, but apparently he wasn't meeting enough women on these ventures. Since he wasn't reeling in enough prospects the legal way, Dutroux then took his crimes to a much more disturbing level in the 1980s. He began to kidnap and teenage girls, aided by several accomplices, one of which was his wife. 5 teens, one as young as 15 and one as old as 19, were kidnapped and assaulted before Dutroux was finally caught and arrested. He and his accomplices received jail time. However, Dutroux only received 13 years for his crimes for raping 5 teenagers. And of that time, he only served 3 years in prison. You see, Marc Dutroux was released by 𝗟𝗡𝗡𝗞𝗦, the Belgian Minister of Justice at the time. This release was granted against the advice from professionals, one the public prosecutor and the other Marc Dutroux's prison psychiatrist. Both of these individuals regarded Dutroux as extremely dangerous. Yet apparently, the Minister of Justice thought otherwise. And more concerning was the fact that while he was in prison, Marc Dutroux was receiving money from the government of Belgium. You see, he had convinced a healthcare professional that he had a mental illness that caused him to be disabled, and he collected around the equivalent of $3,000 a month in public assistance. Marc then used this money to pay for several properties that he owned in Belgium. Most of these were vacant, and some were even eventually used to and hold his kidnapping victims. But despite somehow having the money for 7 properties, Dutroux's state stipend wasn't reduced. The question could and should be asked how an unemployed electrician and scrap dealer was making enough money to own 7 properties. Yet his funds were never looked into, even though these funds were being used to maintain ownership of the locations used to hold and assault his victims. Most could assume that this high cash flow was due to Marc's drug dealing and stolen car trading, but the truth of this insane cash flow was never revealed. Now, we know that Dutroux got this money from trafficking and children to the elites, but we'll talk about that in a second. While Marc was in prison, he was prescribed sedatives for a fake sleeping disorder that he created, sedatives that he would later use on his victims. After his early release in 1992, Dutroux went a step further into the criminal world. Kidnap and rape weren't evil enough for him. He had to turn to murder. Converting the basement of one of his homes into a dungeon with a hidden door, Dutroux took to the streets, this time targeting even younger victims. And as children began to disappear across Belgium, people began to panic. From June 1995 to August 1996, 6 girls, 2 as young as 8 years old, were confirmed to have been abducted by Dutroux, though some believe that many, many more children were victims of this evil man. And of the 6 victims, 4 were murdered. I definitely think Dutroux had way more victims. I mean, I know that that's true. There's so much proof of it. Dutroux's reign of terror only ended, though, when Belgian police discovered 2 of his victims chained in his basement dungeon. 4 of the girls had already been killed, and these 2 were incredibly lucky to be alive. But proper investigation could have saved more. You see, the house where the victims were being held had already been searched before, after a credible tip was provided that came from Dutroux's own mother. You see, tips had been coming in about Dutroux for months, but the police for some reason never followed up, despite Dutroux already being arrested and convicted on rape charges only a few years in the past. So many people had called the local police and said Marc Dutroux is abducting and raping children, and they didn't do anything for some reason, even though he was already convicted of raping teenagers just a year or 2 before. And Dutroux's mother actually called in a tip and said, I think my son's doing these things. So the police went to Marc Dutroux's house. While they were in there, they heard the screams of children. The police talked about this. They actually said they were hearing screaming and children, and there was something that they were hearing, and they didn't do anything. The police...
And they heard it and didn't do anything. These are the... Oh my God, never mind.
Later on, said that they assumed the voices were coming from outside, and they didn't attempt to find the hidden door to the dungeon that concealed them. And because of this failure, the two 8-year-old victims would later die. That's right, the police were in the house where the girls were being held hostage. They were hearing the girls scream, acting on a tip about Marc Dutroux abducting and children.
This is what we up against, y'all. I'm just letting everybody know that this is what we up against. You mean to tell me that the police came because they got a tip, right? The police, not only a tip, the police got a tip from the boy's mother. They went to the house and they heard kids screaming. They heard sounds of the voices of kids, and they still didn't do nothing. That got to tell you something. He was part of the inside. The police, look, man. Well, if they was on the police that went, if they was in on it, they wouldn't have said they heard. I ain't hear nothing. They would have went dead. Come on, y'all. Think about all this stuff, man. Just think a little bit. That's all I'm asking.
They just walked out the door and let those kids die. They hostage. They were hearing the girls scream, acting on a tip about Marc Dutroux abducting and children, and they just walked out the door and let those kids die. They should be sentenced to prison. Dutroux was only caught after being positively identified while he was kidnapping someone. He was finally arrested on August 13th, 1996, along with 2 of his accomplices. And as police investigated the horror show Dutroux had left behind, they located tapes and the bodies of children buried in his backyard. But moreover, they discovered the body of one of Dutroux's accomplices, a man named Bernard Weinstein, whom he had allegedly killed because he had become a liability and was at risk of being caught by police. Dutroux had been caught, and he would finally be sentenced to serve out the rest of his life in prison, but a botched investigation would set all of Belgium into a frenzy. You see, aside from the police having allowed the deaths of those 2 8-year-old girls by failing to properly investigate, the Belgian police practically protected every other accomplice of Dutroux's that could have been revealed. You see, throughout their investigation, the police found videos, undeveloped film, and photographs of the victims. However, the police failed to examine them. Furthermore, a speculum, a device used to examine the during a pelvic exam, was located in Marc Dutroux's home and was even handled by police, but it was never sent in for forensic analysis. Why? Then, the autopsy of one of the victims proved that she had been assaulted for a very long period of time over and over again. Yet the police claimed there was no DNA evidence, no witness reports, or forensic reports to prove that these assaults were from Dutroux or any of his accomplices. DNA testing was performed, yet no one was informed of the results, not even the prosecutors who would go on to handle the case that would finally shut Dutroux away forever. It was also revealed that the police had failed to follow up on a tip that could have caught more accomplices and saved a young girl's life. One of the 8-year-old girls had been spotted at a nightclub in Charleroi, Belgium, but the police failed to show up at the scene to investigate. This only became more concerning as at the time of this sighting, Marc Dutroux had been arrested for car theft. So that doesn't make sense. Marc Dutroux, at that exact moment, had been arrested for stealing cars, and he was in prison. He was actually serving a sentence. So if this victim was at a Charleroi nightclub during Marc Dutroux's brief stay in prison, then someone else would have had access to Marc's dungeon where the girls were being kept. Marc's wife was apparently left in charge of the girls, yet she later stated she was too afraid to even go near them. Multiple unidentified hairs were found in the dungeon after the home was finally searched. Those hairs were sent to DNA analysis, and these 25 unknown DNA profiles were identified, but they never attempted to match them. So that means you've got 25 whose hairs were found in Marc Dutroux's dungeon, and the police have done the analysis. They can compare these hairs, but they just never did it. And even more disturbingly, a judge lied to one of the case prosecutors about this harrowing fact. Besides all these failures, judges were removed from the case, victim testimonies were thrown out, and one of the victims who came forward about Dutroux was assaulted in the media and called a liar to make her lose credibility in the eyes of the public. With all of this, everyone knew that there had to be something else at hand, something that simply just couldn't be incompetence. Many could see where this was going. It was clear that the Belgian government was protecting someone, or worse, multiple people. It was revealed that Dutroux was supplying children to a ring, and there were accomplices within the business world and the government of Belgium. One of Dutroux' accomplices admitted that the two girls, the two youngest, were kidnapped on the order of a mysterious third party. But then suddenly this accomplice stopped cooperating with the police because of death threats. Pointing further to the fact that Dutroux was acting on orders, it was shown that he owned several houses, and by the end of the investigation, they determined that he was worth 6 million francs. The police didn't follow this trail though, but someone else did, thank God. You see, this is where Wikileaks comes in. Through a Wikileaks release, it was learned that large sums of cash were sent to Dutroux' wife's bank account, even including from different currencies than the franc. Wikileaks even claimed, and you can go verify these, I've looked at the documents, that these currencies and this money arrived right at the same time the girls were abducted. So it seems the transfers in values suggested to some that Marc Dutroux was indeed linked to a ring and that he was the supplier. Dutroux even said so himself. He claimed that he was acting on orders to kidnap the girls. He stated that he personally wasn't a and that he was supplying these children to other people. It was also revealed that Dutroux was aided in some of his kidnappings by the Belgian police themselves. It became the belief of the people of Belgium that Dutroux was supplying these girls to the government of Belgium, as well as to the business elite. This only became more clear when Jean-Michel Nihoul, a business magnate, was pointed to as an organizer for the parties when children would be supplied to some by Dutroux. These parties were not only organized for to assault children at, however, some also claimed that they were a place for sadism, brutal torture, and even the murder of children. Yes, victims have claimed that they were forced to murder other children at these parties. Victims have claimed that some of these high-ranking people in the Belgian government and business class would pay money for the ability to rape and then murder a child. They would film this stuff. I mean, it's the sickest, most twisted shit. Yet much of this was completely ignored by the Belgian government. And when witnesses started coming forward to share their stories, they started dying. In true conspiracy fashion, people who had information suddenly began to in mysterious ways. Overall, 20 witnesses directly involved with the Dutroux case died. There's a lot more that had, partial connections to it that died in weird ways as well. And much of this truth was hidden forever. I mean, this shit is crazy. It's in the episode we did, but this would be like someone was like a witness would be driving to the police station to do an interview with the police, and their car would swerve and smash into a wall and they'd die. Or someone was going to testify to the police or whatever the situation was, but they'd be like talking to the authorities the next day, and the night before they would jump off a bridge and be found drowned in the river. 20 people like that. There's explosions, gunshots, murders, self-unalivings, all that stuff. And if 20 witnesses were killed, how many more were threatened into silence? That's a good question to ask. Moreover, Dutroux' wife, the one who received those bank transfers and received that money for the kidnappings, she was sentenced to prison time as well, but quickly found refuge in a monastery and now lives alongside the nuns who inhabit it. It was clear that something much bigger was going on than just a small gang of sick men. When it was revealed how depraved these men's crimes were and how the government practically protected them and his accomplices, marches were organized across Belgium, one which would be the largest demonstration in Belgian history, with over 300,000 participants. Yes, the Belgian government covered up the story so insanely, and the police, and it just showed that every single person was involved in this thing all the way to the top of the Belgian monarchy and government, that 300,000 people got out on the streets protesting the government for being pedophiles. This case almost led to a full-scale revolution against the Belgian government, and after the events of the investigation, nearly a third of Belgians with the Dutroux surname legally changed it to have no association with the criminal. So eventually, Marc Dutroux was sentenced to life in prison in 2004, and after the trial ended, the case files were sealed and heavily redacted to ensure that no one could ever stumble upon the grisly truth. That's one way governments enact cover-ups. They seal files so that nobody can ever look at the...
Do y'all hear this? Sound like the Watergate or something to me. We don't know. Us dummies, the ones that think they are supposed to vote for somebody and think they doing something, we don't know no better. I swear to y'all, man, these freaks, the more freaky you are, the more determined you need to get high up into some status to mess with some real money. What you gonna buy? What it feels like to buy a human being. Some people want to experience that, which is a shame. And a little kid I could have all the money in the world, man. I swear I don't want to buy nobody. Shh.
Truth of what really happened.
Don't even want to buy a dog or a cat. I don't want to buy no dog. I'm from the land where dogs supposed to be given to you.
In these cases. Wikileaks, though, wouldn't let that stand. In 2009, they made sure to publish what they could find for the public to view. But the Belgian government acted quickly. They scrubbed these documents from the internet as fast as they could and ensured that no one could look in on their dirty secrets. They claimed that they removed the documents from the internet because certain people were named who were innocent, but who had been mentioned during the investigation. The government of Belgium said that they didn't want these people facing unjust scrutiny, so they were hiding the documents from the public eye. This only confirmed to people who looked at these documents their suspicions that these perpetrators were sky-high members of society, that the government of Belgium was hiding an elite ring that operated right under the citizens' noses. Moreover, the Belgian X-Files, as they were called, were later released, detailing the accounts of witnesses. All the details of this case made it clear that high amounts of money were involved, as well as blackmail and a sophisticated organization that protected its members. You see, themes of blackmail and rings are extremely common, especially in the Western world. Just look at cover-ups like the Franklin cover-up, Jeffrey Epstein, anybody, J. Edgar Hoover, Roy Cohn, everybody. I mean, these people are all involved in blackmail. It's a political thing. And basically what it entails is people trying to get blackmail on politicians. Like, let's say you set up this ring and your children out. You get a senator super drugged up. You know that he's already got an interest in kids because for some reason politics attracts. And then you say, hey man, we're in this secret room, this secret club. This is a political party. You trust everybody here. Here's an underage that you can go have with. Then they videotape and photograph that senator having with that child, and when they wake up the next day hungover, the person running that party sends them a photograph on their phone or slips them, an envelope with a printed out photograph of them and says, I own you now. Now you have to do exactly what I tell you to do. That's where the control comes from in the blackmail. But more information comes from the Marc Dutroux scandal that isn't part of the general conspiracy, one that makes it even more evil and depraved than simply a massive ring. In the home of Bernard Weinstein, the accomplice killed by Marc Dutroux, an undated letter was found. This letter was supposedly sent by someone called Anubis and mentioned gifts for a high priestess. There was even a designation about the age and gender that the presents should be. The reason for these gifts was that a very special ceremony would soon be taking place. This was all written down in the letter. A cult in Charleroi, one of the main locations for Dutroux's crimes allegedly, had a member who used the very same alias. The cult that this member belonged to was called Abraxas, a satanic sect operating in Belgium. In late 1996, the police followed up on the note and raided their headquarters, the Institute of Abraxas, with 150 police officers. Police took away full bags of papers, video cassettes, and even a whole refrigerator. The news outlet Irish Times even said that the police took away black magic ritual implements and human skulls. The high priestess of the satanic cult, Dominique Kindermans, later spoke to the police and stated that, of course, she had no knowledge of Dutroux nor his accomplice Weinstein. But more kept coming out. An abandoned mine complex was searched nearby in the suburb of 𝗗𝗢𝗡. The authorities believed that abducted children kidnapped by Dutroux were being held inside of this abandoned mining complex. This is because Dutroux had written about this and drawn out diagrams of it before he was arrested. A spokesman was then asked to comment on the link between Abraxas and the mining complex. However, this spokesman refused. And Abraxas is insane. So if you actually dig into this case and you actually do the research on this thing, a lot of people that I've spoken with about Dutroux, when you bring up this Abraxas angle, they want to say, oh, there was nothing definite ever proven there. There was no concrete connection. And I'll say true. There really wasn't anything that was initially discovered, at least to our knowledge, inside of the Abraxas compound. Which, now that I say that out loud, it's like you got 150 police officers. They obviously thought something was going on there. The Belgian police were already corrupt as in this case, so it's like, even if they found, something, 15 rolls of child, it's not like they would come out and say that. I mean, it's really weird, but there's some really weird things about Abraxas. The main thing that when you talk to people, they say, oh, they were just kind of a scapegoat for Marc Dutroux, but that's, in my mind, untrue. I mean, the letter itself is extremely bizarre. It's written directly to Bernard Weinstein. It's in his house. I think it was the night before or the day before the raid on Abraxas. Witnesses who lived in the area that surrounded their temple, they actually saw members loading a ton of shit out of the building. Like, it looked like they were moving out, they said. said. There's people that saw this and they testified about it. So it's just, I mean, really weird timing. What are the odds that you're going to be moving out a ton of shit? I mean, like, that's a really weird point. People have mentioned rumors for many years that secret tunnels connect Chateau d'Amerois to the rest of Belgium. But there's even more compelling evidence that links Marc Dutroux, his massive organization, and the Mothers of Darkness Castle. Many of the Marc Dutroux scandal activities are said to have taken place in castles, named by leaked documents on the Dutroux case. This theory was further pressed forward by the 2001 book, File, The Scandal of the Dutroux Affair. In this book, the Chateau d'Amerois is said to be the site of not only child abuse, but also satanic rituals. Apparently, according to the authors, a report that surfaced from the Dutroux affair brings a concerning letter to light. It's from a retired gendarme or police officer, and specifically, it mentions this castle. This gendarme apparently hosted a priest from Mexico in early 1996. A friend of the priest, a Dutchman, came to pick him up from the gendarme's home. This Dutchman apparently claimed that the Chateau d'Amerois was a place where parties, as well as the satanic ritual sacrifice of children, took place. Councilmen, lawyers, and high-ranking judges in the government were all said to have attended orgies organized by Dutroux's organization. And according to the Dutchman who wrote that letter, the one who informed him of this activity was a member of NATO, and he was an American. Apparently, this American participated in one of these rituals and was disgusted by it, and later returned to the US. But that wasn't all. Apparently, this priest who the Dutchman came to see was later in contact with the families of the two 8-year-old victims of Marc Dutroux. But more came forward from author and conspiracy theorist Fritz Springmeier. Apparently, the castle is indeed used by pedophiles and Satanists and murder small children in a ritual called the Pink Ballet. Now, to put this into perspective real quick, the Belgian X-Files, I've read through every single page. There are hundreds of pages, and they're some of the most incredibly disturbing shit I've ever read. They're all essentially summaries of testimony or direct testimony from victims and witnesses of Dutroux's crimes that were, I believe, mostly, if not completely, deemed unusable in court. So they had hundreds and hundreds of pages of testimony of children talking about getting, naming people's names, talking about watching children get. I remember one of the things I read was this girl watched these men make another little girl, I don't even know how to say this, she had no clothing on, and apparently they made a dog do things to the girl, and then they allowed the dog to eat the girl from the privates up while she was alive, and they filmed this whole thing, and the men were laughing watching this. We actually visited the place where that was supposed to have happened in our Dutroux documentary, but that's just one. There's thousands of things like that these children are claiming happened, and the police completely ignored all of them and said that, yeah, this stuff didn't happen. These are just, you know, we can't confirm that this happened because there's no witness that's going to speak to it other than the witness themselves, which is the.
You know what tripped me out, man? Put yourself in a police officer's shoes. Man, this is way over my head. I want to go home and play. I want to go home and play with my kids. Getting spooky in here, man. I done heard something. Man, I keep, when I'm doing this stuff, man, I'm like, I need to bring my gun down here with me or something. But, anyway, a police officer that's supposed to be all big and bad, they get into a routine of doing their job. Routine. Pull a car over, write a speeding ticket, send them on their way. Pull a car over, somebody got a warrant, put the handcuffs, take them to jail. But you start getting into this stuff, and I heard that our government is corrupt. If the people on the streets heard it, you know he heard it. So I tell you what, I think I hear something down the street. I'll be back. And they getting up out of there. Punks, they scared. If you scared, say you scared, man. That's crazy.
Child. And so that's why when you get into these X-Files, it's a controversial thing because, you know, it's weird. There isn't like direct physical evidence, but there is a lot of really direct evidence. Like there's one victim who testified named Regina Louf, and she talked about where that dog thing happened, and she described the interior of this building, said it was made by this corporation. It's got a very distinct interior. She described the furniture, the lighting, everything. It was an industrial building, so a place that a child would never be. She had no family that worked there, anything like that. And when the police brought her there to talk about it, they went into the building and found that it was exactly how she had described it. So stuff like that. There's a ton of corroborating evidence in there. And it's just wild to me that the police just never did anything. They sealed these files so that people would never read them or learn about this stuff. Let's get back to the Chateau and the Pink Ballet. I just wanted to explain that so when we talk about the Belgian X-Files, you know what I'm referring to. It's victim testimony. The Pink Ballet is mentioned quite regularly in the Belgian X-Files. The files were named the X-Files because the witnesses' own identities were redacted in favor of the letter X and a variable associated. So these kids, these victims, instead of using their names in these X-Files, these victims were referred to as X1, X2, X3, X4, and so on. The witnesses state that the Pink Ballet was connected to or supplied by Dutroux and his accomplices. Apparently, video evidence was captured of this event, videos which included the faces and names of prominent politicians. With confirmation that this ritual exists, could Springmeier have been taking it a step too far by saying it was a satanic ritual where took place? Witness X1, or Regina Louf, says otherwise. During the trial, Regina was deemed witness X1 to protect her identity, but later came out into the open. This woman and others described some horrific events that would occur at these gatherings. Louf went to the media in 1998, being interviewed by Panorama, partially sharing her story. According to Regina, she was raised by her grandmother from birth to be used by the massive ring, of which Dutroux was only a small part. Regina was trained in the most demented of ways, experiencing things that children should not even know exist, let alone be subjected to. Regina stated that she began to be abused by within the ring at the age of 3 or 4, and that money was the primary objective. She also said that snuff films were a regular aspect of her life. When she was 10 years old, Regina claimed she became pregnant by a pedophile. After giving birth to this man's baby, Regina was only allowed to be with her child for a few moments before this group of pedophiles ripped the baby from her arms, assaulted it, and murdered the baby, then murdered its corpse, all on video while smiling and laughing in front of Regina, since she was 10 years old. She continued on, saying that when children were past the age where they could be bought and sold, they were killed on film, and those films were then sold to clients. Regina stated that she had seen the films herself, and that these videos were regularly viewed and played at these parties. At these parties, several children will be provided to groups of pedophiles. She went on to say that those who had been witnesses to the murder in real life were at the parties, and that they gave commentary as the video was playing out, cold and remorseless of their monstrous crime. She stated that while the pedophiles would be watching these snuff films, she and the other children in attendance were
rendabel was, die niet meer genoeg opbracht of die, laten we zeggen, zo emotioneel eronder doorging dat dat kind eigenlijk niet meer voor het netwerk kon gebruikt worden, die belandde in het eindcircuit. Het eindcircuit was het laatste stadium, daarin werd je vermoord. Dat was eigenlijk de laatste keer waarin dat ze nog geld konden maken van u. Dat was eigenlijk de grootste bedoeling. Zo'n kind die in het eindcircuit terecht kwam, die werd ofwel gebruikt voor daders die zelf de moord wilden doen, maar niet op film wilden staan. Of die door, laten we zeggen, figuranten vermoord werd. Waarvan dat dus degene die de opdracht gegeven had, de film kreeg. Dat waren de 2 keuzes die je had als dader. Als slachtoffer had je geen keuze natuurlijk.
Maar die films kwamen niet in een commercieel circuit?
De films kwamen niet zozeer in een commercieel circuit terecht. De films werden gemaakt in opdracht van 1 persoon. En daar bestonden eigenlijk heel weinig kopies van. Dat was eigenlijk alleen maar 1 film voor die persoon. En dat was alles. De mensen die van het netwerk gebruik maakten, die wilden niet het risico lopen dat eigenlijk zo'n films gecommercialiseerd werden en eventueel konden gelinkt worden ooit aan de opdrachtgevers.
She then gave an account of the murder of 16-year-old Christine Van Hees, a murder linked to both Marc Dutroux and Michel Nahul, the business magnate. 16-year-old Christine was apparently forced into by Michel Nahul after being introduced through Marc Dutroux. Regina explained that Christine, the 16-year-old victim, was murdered because she couldn't adapt to the and so she was killed by Dutroux, Nahul, and others that she refused to name. She then named other girls who were victims and described the levels at which people entered the organization. She said that people didn't immediately enter the ring and take part in the murder. She said that people were introduced slowly over time, and as they became more trustworthy and moved up in the ring, they were pressed into further atrocities. At first, she said, these men would have to engage in a pedophilic with girls bordering a legal age. But then, as the men moved up in the hierarchy of the ring, they would take part in bestiality, sadism, torture, and at the highest levels, ritual murder. But not just anyone could join. They had to be powerful and have good connections that the ring could make use of. Regina said that it was just as much about maintaining contacts with the elite as it was about pedophilia. Regina didn't share everything in her Panorama interview, however. In one of her testimonies, Regina talked about something that makes one's blood run cold. At an unnamed castle, children, according to Regina, were forced to strip naked except for shoes and were then told to run off into the forest. Behind them, men with dogs waited to chase them. Regina was not a victim of the hunting party in this testimony. She said that she was forced to participate in the hunt. She was told she had to go hunt and a child, or that she would be killed herself. Interestingly, one supposed survivor of satanic ritual discussed something that she experienced, a situation so exactly similar that it could have been at the same event. At a party attended by members of the ruling elite, according to this victim, children would be stripped naked except for tennis shoes and allowed to run into the forest. Behind them, the members of the elite chased them, wearing masks, armed and ready to kill the children were caught. It mimicked The Most Dangerous Game, the famous story by Richard Connell, where a Russian aristocrat hunts a castaway on an island in the Caribbean. Even in real life, this so-called game was dubbed with this title, even though the victim was not an accomplished big game hunter, but blameless innocent children. The survivor stated that the game would start early in the evening, which Regina Louf also corroborated. This unnamed survivor,
You know, it's 3 different movies that I know of. It's probably a hell of a lot more. It's a B movie with Ice-T. Ice-T was a bum on the street, and they paid him a lot of money to come and say, well, we're gonna play a game. It's a hunting game. You wanna make some money? And they hunted his tail for real, and tried to kill him, but he got away. Yeah, it's so many movies of this real life stuff, man. You want to know where they get these movies ideas from? All of them. If it's in a movie, it's either gonna happen in real life or about to happen.
felt she had no place to run and no place to hide, though, and there were no limits as to what could happen to her at the time. It was one of the most extreme situations she had ever survived. Yet somehow, she managed to pull through. The fact that satanic cults could exist right now before our very eyes, and the depth of evil of the crimes they were committing, seems like something that could only happen in a barbaric era. But was this horrific game also being played at the Chateau d'Amerois? And was it satanic in nature, as the unnamed survivor experienced? There have been reports about the Chateau that these are the games that they play, the most dangerous games, these hunting parties. And obviously that's not something that's going to be written down in history. Regina Louf did have something to say about satanic rituals in her portion of the X-Files. She talked about blood rituals being held at a castle near Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and said that Mark Dutroux was indeed connected to satanic groups. Moreover, multiple witnesses in the X-Files claimed that prominent men in Belgian society were witnesses to and accomplices in satanic rituals at several locations in Europe, some of which included blood magic and sacrifice. But who was this cult, and what was their aim? Well, one of the cults that was named in the files of Dutroux's case, like we mentioned before, was Abraxas. This cult's name has ancient origins and is known to worship a demon by the same name. This demon is mentioned in an ancient Egyptian invocation, as well as in Judeo-Christian texts. The Basilidians, described by Infernal Dictionary author 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗞𝗦 as the heretics of the 2nd century, labeled this being as the supreme god. The Catholic Church had labeled this being as a demon, and Plancy stated that the Basilidians attributed Abraxas' rule to 365 skies and 365 virtues. Plancy further states that the Basilidians believed Abraxas sent Jesus Christ to Earth, and that Jesus was merely a benevolent ghost. The being is referred to as several different beings, some claiming it's a god, some a demon, and some an archon. What is repetitious in all beliefs, though, is that 365 is a very significant number for this being, as the name in Greek contains the number 365. The same number as the days in the year. The Basilidians believed that Abraxas had another 364 gods at his disposal. Interestingly, the Chateau d'Amerois has exactly 365 windows. Abraxas in ancient amulets is depicted as a being with the head of a king and a serpent, or two serpents for feet. In the amulets, a word is spelled possibly related to abracadabra, the ancient ritual incantation meant to ward off illness, misfortune, or harm. Above his head, he holds a whip. This connection was discovered in the note to Weinstein sent by an anonymous member of a modern-day Abraxas cult. Dutroux received aid in kidnapping children for the ring he was employed by, apparently from police who were also wrapped up in his scrap dealing and car theft. Interestingly enough, the publication Der Spiegel announced that 4 Belgian police officers were discovered to be Abraxas members, with one serving as the cult's treasurer. One of the witnesses to the cult implicated Prince Alexander de Merode of Belgium in a black mass where children were and babies were and sacrifices of both animals and adults took place. Apparently, the murder in this ritual were men in black hoods. Prince Alexander is again implicated by witness X2 as being part of the child hunts that Regina Louf described, though these occurred at 𝗟𝗢𝗡𝗞𝗦 Castle. Satanic feasts are also mentioned, as well as a ritual where an infant and sheep are and their blood combined while an takes place. If this weren't enough, apparently, according to these files, children were forced to eat human flesh and were branded with hot irons. It doesn't seem that any sane being could preside over such horrors, but according to some, those who preside over the rituals were once victims themselves.
Man, I swear I almost Earl, man. I had to make myself think of something else when they said they was forcing kids to eat. I had to make myself think of motorcycles and cars or something, happy stuff. I was like, Lord, I don't want to, we live too? I'm about to Earl right now. Whew. I can't rewind.
Chateau Amerois is better known by English speakers as the Mothers of Darkness Castle, and this name comes from the supposed witches who allegedly perform dark magic within its halls. Called the Mothers of Darkness or High Priestesses, it's claimed that these satanic witches were ordained from birth, having descended from old satanic families. Rumors abound that the powerful elite have been part of satanic families for generations, with some even saying that Queen Elizabeth, the same bloodline as the former Saxe-Coburg owners, is also descended from Satanists. The Mothers of Darkness, or the witches of the Chateau Amerois, are said to have been the subjects of satanic rituals from an extremely early age. These rituals are alleged to contain physical, sexual, and mental abuse. This abuse results in a dissociative disorder that allows children to be programmable, so that as they grow older, they will willingly participate and even perpetrate the abuse of children. This dissociative disorder is typically multiple personality disorder, now known as dissociative identity disorder. This abuse that these children suffer at a young age fractures their minds early on due to the continuous trauma. In dissociative identity disorder, a victim's personality becomes incredibly warped as a way to deal with the extreme suffering they faced as children. Because they were trained to live with the trauma, they become accustomed to it, and they're groomed to take part in it. The result of mental trauma is well documented, with sexual abuse survivor Paul Benassi, famed for speaking out against the Franklin Credit Union ring, suffering from the same disorder, claiming that he too was abused as a child in order to be programmed. But back to the witches of the Chateau. According to people who've researched this matter, when these women, the Mothers of Darkness, have reached adulthood, they're finally able to continue the cycle of violence that dominated their whole lives as children. Now that these women are adults and hardwired to accept the trauma, they perform these horrific rituals at the behest of the elite, doing their bidding regardless of the cost. Now, where does all this information come from? I mean, it seems like we're just pulling this from thin air, right? Well, Regina Louf can be cited as a source of evidence in this case. She stated in one of her witness testimonies that she was forced to participate in the abuse as she got older, already having been programmed to accept the abuse from her earliest days. From a young age, Regina was programmed to accept the traumas of her life, even apparently forced to at some points. If Regina could be trained to perhaps these women of the Chateau Amerois could be trained to do even worse. Something eerie about the Chateau and the Mothers of Darkness as well is, apparently according to some people and some stuff that I've read, these women are never allowed to leave the walls of the castle. So that would mean that these witches, these satanic witches, are inside of the Chateau Amerois at all times. They don't come outside, maybe every once in a while at night to do these rituals, but they're held there and confined there and broken and until they
3
become
more
these
minutes.
contorted human demons. So that was eerie when we visited the chateau, thinking there could be these people in there. But why in Belgium? Why would all these horrible things be happening there? And why would a satanic cult be hiding in the Chateau d'Amerois? Well, Brussels hosts the Council of the European Union, as well as serving as a hub for NATO, just as a NATO member was mentioned in the witness statements about the chateau. Because of these major organizations being concentrated here, some believe that Belgium is the concentration point for the New World Order. Many rich and powerful people make stops in Belgium, all well connected and useful for a cult such as Abraxas. Perhaps because these connected people meet here, Abraxas uses it as a poaching ground for inducting new members into their dark ranks. Or perhaps it's the other way around. Perhaps this massive satanic cult, with satanic ritual sites mentioned across Belgium, Holland, and the Netherlands, placed their own into these positions of power and flourished from there. There are more supposed satanic estates in Belgium itself. We visited a few of them. Certainly, the Institute of Abraxas and Chateau d'Amerois aren't the only ones. These rituals are said to bring the members of satanic cults power, fame, and riches. These kinds of lures are exactly the type that would lure those seeking power in Europe and world governments in. Such a thing could lure anyone, even if they aren't willing to do what's asked of them. Apparently, one such man exists who saw the inner workings of the cult and said no. His name was Ronald Bernard, a Dutch banker. He's gone on interviews, he was a whistleblower, and he claimed that the world's elite did participate in these satanic rituals, those that involved the abuse of children and torture. But how would he know this? Well, Ronald Bernard was one of the men they asked to attend, and he did. But he found that he couldn't stomach what these cultists were doing behind closed doors.
This is pertinent. All this made me believe.
You see, Bernard was a major player at the highest levels of finance and turned whistleblower for the evil elite after seeing the truth of what they did. He gave information on what the world of the elite did, what he was asked to do, and who they really were, as well as how long this had been occurring for. Ronald Bernard said that he played at a high level for 5 years, but it didn't happen overnight. He had to earn his place amongst the ranks of the world's highest level power brokers. Interestingly, comments made by Regina Louf mirror this admission. She stated in her interview with Panorama that to be introduced into the ring, you had to be asked to join and slowly brought into the fold. She stated that men were started off with girls aged 16 to 17, and that as they were pulled further into the ranks, the ages got even younger as you moved up. And how did Bernard earn his place in the ring? He said that in the financial world, he saw the truth as it really was, instead of only a small portion, because he could connect the dots of information and complete the pictures himself. Because of this unique position, he learned all of the actual truth, as he called it. When asked in what regard, he said that his clients gave him glimpses into how the world worked. He stated that in hindsight, he didn't know everything, but he did know a lot because his clients were banks who didn't want blood on their hands and needed someone to cover their trail. Within those banks, he said there were always several people who knew damn well what was going on. He said that on average, 1% of a bank knew the truth regarding the happenings within the world because they were involved with the flow of money. He stated that he worked with governments, multinationals, secret services, as well as terrorist organizations. He stated that you get all of the groups involved with the big money as clients. After this happens, he says, you start to see the connections. In other words, everyone knows a little piece of everything, but only those at the very top know the whole story. But because Bernard was in the middle of it all, he saw and knew everything and how it related to everyone involved. He saw where the money was coming from and where it went, and continued to gain information. And through that, he gained the complete view of everything that was happening in the world. In his position, he said he had to serve and keep everyone happy, everyone in every group, including the terrorist organizations. He later on stated that the secret services of countries were thought of as a body meant to protect the people, their country, etc. But in truth, he stated that these were the criminal organizations hiding behind a mask. But what did he mean by that? He was talking.
That's it right there, man. That's the answer. The top criminal people are hiding behind the mask, and the mask is the governments. It's the governments, man. That's why it's hard to change some of these laws. That's why the laws are so weak. All the governments worldwide know that we need crime to make this economy circulate hard. You got to buy alarms and security codes. You have to buy antiviruses for your computer. You have to buy locks. Oh my gracious, man. You have to buy. Fear makes people spend money to protect their family. I'm gonna stop right here, man, because my stomach hurting, young. I cannot believe I'm trying to get it out of my mind. I gotta take a break. It's been an hour. We try to do an hour. It's gonna be a part 2 to this. Petey Castle. And they just starting the whole story of this video, but I'm learning in this video, I done learned so much about how the people end up getting into this stuff, man. And it's their money. And it's almost like, look, you can get more money, but you gotta prove that you can be trusted. I mean, really, really prove that you can be trusted. And how can you prove that? Well, we're going to do this whole thing. Somebody's going to pass away, be unalived, and you got to participate in this thing with us. Then they know they can trust you with large sums of money. And then they accept, because if they decline, then you might be the one being unalived. Look here, I'm going to get on up out of here, because if they ask you that question, they really, really, really think that you're going to slant to the yes. But if you say no, dude, I'm just letting you know something might happen to you, bruh. Because if I don't bring you back with me, then it's going to be something on your head. What? So I don't want to get close to these people unless I'm taking them down. Look here, I'm going to get on up out of here. Y'all take it light, take it slow. Tell them Uncle Mike told you so. Peace out. Stay tuned for part 2.